The snow had come early that year, thick and bitter as old grudges. Pine needles bowed beneath it, the world hushed in white silence. Somewhere high in the Bitterroot Range, a single axe rose and fell with steady rhythm, splitting frozen logs on the edge of the timberline. Hewitt Coyle didn't speak much, didn't drink, didn't smile. Just worked the woods from sunup till the moon showed teeth, living in a crooked cabin with a broken stove and a Bible he never opened. Men in town called him the Quiet, a relic from the war who'd never quite come home. His beard was long and tangled, more gray than black. His eyes pale as river ice, missed nothing. He moved with the certainty of a man who lived too long in silence. Not quite afraid of dying, just too stubborn to give in. Some said he'd once been married. Others whispered of a child buried under the trees behind his cabin. But Hewitt never spoke of the past. The past, like rot, had to be cut away clean. He only came down the mountain once a season, just long enough to sell his lumber and buy salt, powder, and tobacco he never smoked. The townsfolk of Black Hollow left him be mostly. They'd seen enough broken men to know when to steer clear. This time, though, something was different. He arrived just as the sky turned the color of old bruises, a long shadow on a mule, dragging a handcart behind him with tarpaulin stretched taut. He didn't speak when the saloon-keeper asked what he was hauling, just tied the mule, pushed through the swinging doors, and stood there while the room quieted. Poker chips froze midair. Someone coughed, and then the door opened again. A man in a threadbare coat, rail-thin and wild-eyed, shoved someone, into the saloon behind him. Right. It was a woman, filthy and bruised, hands bound at the wrists. A burlap sack was tied over her head, cinched tight with twine. She stumbled, barely able to keep upright, her thin frame swaying with every ragged breath. The man behind her grinned. $2, he said, spitting into a nearby spittoon. That's all I'm asking. She's trouble, no doubt, but alive. Breath's regular. Don't talk, don't bite. You boys ever seen a mute whore? A few in the room laughed. Others looked away. The man gave the sack-headed woman a rough shove forward. She collapsed onto the floorboards, thin arms trembling, knees cut open and bleeding. She didn't cry out. Picked her up near the canyon trail, wandering, half-starved and dumb as a mule. Figure I'd make a trade before she drops dead. Hewitt stepped forward. No words, just reached into his coat and dropped $2 silver onto the bar with a clink that echoed like judgment. You serious? Quiet? Barked the saloon-keeper. She could be a fugitive or sick. Hewitt didn't answer. He just took hold of the rope, helping the woman to her feet. She flinched at his touch, then steadied when he didn't yank or shove. His hand was firm but careful, like he was lifting something fragile. He guided her back through the swinging doors, without a word. The man with a grin watched them go, chewing on a toothpick. Ain't love beautiful, he muttered. Back in the woods, night fell fast. The wind dragged through the trees like a wounded animal, howling low and cruel. Hewitt laid a bedroll out near the fire, set water to boil. The woman sat near the flames, still wearing the sack, her hands loose now but unmoving. She hadn't spoken, hadn't tried to run, just stared into the fire, her breathing shallow. Hewitt handed her a tin cup. She hesitated, then drank. He didn't ask her name, didn't ask what had happened. That was his mercy. He'd known too many folks whose stories started with fire and ended in silence. This was no different. The sack would come off when she chose, or not at all. The next morning, she was still there, still breathing, still silent. So he made her coffee. They fell into a rhythm of sorts. She cleaned his cabin slowly, awkwardly at first. She tended the stove. She watched him work. Days passed with little said and less questioned. Hewitt would leave at dawn, return with game or lumber, and she would have the fire built just high enough to keep the cold outside where it belonged. And always the sack remained. Sometimes she would flinch at loud sounds. Once, when Hewitt slammed the woodpile gate too hard, she curled into a ball and wouldn't uncurl for an hour. Other nights, she sat outside long past dusk, watching the trees like they might whisper something she needed to hear. One evening, Hewitt found her kneeling by the small grave behind his cabin. The cross was simple, no name, just a carved wooden locket hung on a nail. She didn't ask. He didn't explain. After that, she started humming, soft, wordless, like a bird trying to remember its own song. Then came the riders. 3 of them, black coats over dark horses, crunching through snow like vultures in formation. They arrived just before sunset, faces red from cold, eyes sharper than lawmen's had a right to be. The one in front wore a derby hat and a gun belt too fine for a common man. He dismounted, stepped forward, and knocked on the cabin door with the back of his knuckles. Not loud, just deliberate. Hewitt opened the door, stared. The man nodded like they'd met before. "Evening," he said. "Name's Mott. Sheriff now, though that don't mean much up here. I'm looking for someone, female, about so tall. Burn marks on her neck. Quiet type, no answer." Pulled a folded paper from his coat. Held it out. "Wanted for arson, attempted murder, and abandoning her lawful husband during a fire. Rewards $30, dead or alive." Got a good description. Says she wears a sack. Behind Hewitt, the woman stood in the shadows, still listening. Mott raised an eyebrow.
"I know."
"You don't talk much, Mr. Coyle, but harboring fugitives is a hanging offense, even up in the pines." Hewitt said nothing. Mott took a slow step forward. His boots crunched on frost. One hand rested on his revolver. "I can take her in gentle, or I can take her in bloody. Your choice." Hewitt's eyes flicked to the fire behind him, then to the woman, then back to Mott. "She stays," he said. First words he'd spoken in weeks, maybe months. Mott's jaw tightened. He looked at his men, then back at the cabin. "Reckon you made your choice, then." He turned, mounted, spat into the snow. "I'll be back with papers and a rope." They rode off into the dusk, leaving only hoof prints and the promise of violence. Inside, the woman trembled. Her hands gripped the wooden table until her knuckles bled white. Hewitt poured coffee, sat across from her, waited. She reached up slowly, his fingers on the sack, pulled. The light from the fire danced across her face, revealing burned scars across one cheek. A swollen eye nearly shut, and a long welt at her throat that spoke of ropes, not time. Her voice, when it came, was rasped and raw. "My name's Clara." Hewitt didn't flinch, didn't look away. Clara swallowed hard, then added like an afterthought, "I didn't kill my husband. Just let the fire finish what he started." Snow fell outside in quiet flakes. Inside, neither of them moved. And still, somewhere in that long, frozen silence, something shifted, not quite hope, but the memory of it, a kind of beginning, and a reckoning not far behind. The days that followed were thick with waiting, like the hush before a storm. Clara moved through Hewitt's cabin with a kind of cautious grace, as if the floorboards might betray her. She spoke only when needed, and even then her voice sounded like wind scraping over stone. But she listened. To the birds, the trees, to Hewitt's silence. She never asked why he took her in. He never asked what she ran from. But each saw the scars in the other, not just the ones on skin. Outside, the snow deepened. The world narrowed to wood smoke, frostbite, and the soft creak of trees settling under ice. At night, Clara sat beside the fire and mended Hewitt's shirts with fingers still stiff from old burns. He'd nod in thanks, but never speak of it. It was their way. Sparse, careful, respectful. But peace is a stranger in Black Hollow country, and it never stays long. One morning, as the sun cracked low through a veil of cloud, Hewitt found prints in the snow that hadn't been there the day before. Hooves. 3 horses, no wagon, no shoes on the beasts. Hivercame wanted quiet. He followed the trail a quarter-mile before turning back. They were close, watching, waiting. That evening, Clara cut her hair, sat by the mirror with a hunting knife, and carved away the curls that once fell to her back. No explanation. Just left the strands in the hearth. Fire took them without a sound. "They always come back," she said softly, not looking at him. He didn't ask who they were. He already knew, not names, but types. When Hewitt had fought at Antietam, it hadn't been for politics. It had been for the man beside him, a farmhand from Missouri who bled out clutching, a Bible in one hand and a ribbon in the other. Hewitt had carried that ribbon for 2 years after. When the war ended, he buried it beneath the roots of a cottonwood tree alongside what was left of himself. Now sitting across from Clara, watching her tremble and not break, he felt the first stirring of that lost self again, aching, old, but alive. Late the next afternoon, a sharp knock split the quiet. Hewitt's eyes flicked at Clara. She didn't move. Another knock, slower this time, deliberate. He opened the door with his rifle in hand, though not raised. A man stood on the threshold, tall, scarred, and silent. His face was marked by wind and years, his eyes deep set beneath a broad hat. He wore deerskin, stitched with care, and carried a long rifle across his back. Clara inhaled sharply, her lips parted, but no sound came. Hewitt stepped aside. The man entered, nodded once. "Walks with shadows," Hewitt said, more to himself than anyone. The man placed a bundle of firewood on the floor, then sat near the flames like he belonged there. Years ago, Hewitt had saved him, half dead from a cavalry raid near Fort Owen, dragged him out from under a pile of corpses, stitched his side shut with fishing line. They never spoke of it afterward, just nodded when they crossed paths. Now the debt had come full circle. Walks with Shadows looked at Clara, then back to Hewitt. "She's hunted," he said. "I know, the sheriff is not alone. Others come. Paid men. I know that too." The fire cracked. No one moved. That night, Hewitt loaded his rifle slow and deliberate, checked the powder, oiled the lever. Clara watched him quiet, then stepped into the lamplight holding a small parcel wrapped in cloth. "Found this in the woodshed," she said. Buried under an old crate, he took it, unwrapped it. Side lay a revolver, ivory handle, clean barrel, and a marshal's badge dulled with age. Clara's eyes widened. "You were?" "No," Hewitt said flatly. He closed the cloth and handed it back. "I didn't want the badge," he added, "but I buried the man who wore it." The next morning, Walks with Shadows was gone. Left no sign but a broken branch near the pine's edge. Hewitt didn't question it. Some men moved like smoke, and he was one of them. He spent the day boarding the windows, his setting snares. Digging a shallow trench near the woodline, not deep enough for a grave, but enough to slow a man on horseback. Clara stood watch while Hewitt worked, eyes sharp, hands steady. Whatever fear she'd carried had hardened into something else now, something useful. They didn't sleep that night, just waited. Dawn came slow, dragging red across the snow like blood and linen. A silence deeper than the grave settled over the woods. Then hooves. 3 riders, same as before, but slower now. Closer. Clara stood in the doorway, a kitchen knife behind her back. Hewitt sat just inside, rifle resting on his lap, eyes trained through the open slit in the window shutter. The men dismounted at the tree line. One called out, voice lazy with false charm. "Clara May Winslow, you in there? Sheriff Mott sends his regards. Says you're overdue for a hanging." No answer. Another voice, coarser. "We don't aim to shoot the place up. Come quiet, we'll be quick. Try to run, we'll burn you out." Still no answer, then silence again. One of the men crept forward, rifle raised, step by step through the snow. Hewitt didn't wait for him to get close. He fired once, clean shot through the leg. The man screamed, dropped his weapon, writhed in the drift. Another fired back, missed. Bullet thudded into the cabin wall. Clara ducked, then sprang forward, tossing boiling water from the kettle out the door. A burst of steam and pain, a shout, another shot. "Someone stumbled!" Hewitt rolled out the side door, rifle swinging around. 2 more shots. One missed. One didn't. And then silence, broken only by gasps and whimpers in the snow. Only one rider remained. The third, hidden behind a tree, he called out, furious now. "You think you'll live through this, old man? Sheriff Mott? Bring in 6 more like me tomorrow?" Hewitt didn't reply. Just aimed, waited. And then a soft rustle, a crunch. Walks with Shadows stepped out behind the rider, silent as a ghost, and slit his throat clean. The man dropped like a felled sapling. When the quiet settled again, Hewitt lowered his rifle. Clara stood in the doorway, hair wind-whipped, face flushed. She didn't smile. Neither did he. But she stepped forward, took his hand in both of hers. "I don't want to run anymore," she said. "You won't," he replied. In the snow behind the cabin, The three men were buried shallow, beneath stones and pine needles. Walks with Shadows said nothing, just nodded once before vanishing into the trees again. By dusk, the air felt different, still cold, still sharp. But something in it had shifted. The scent of thaw. Of reckoning to come. They knew Mott would return, knew he'd bring more guns, more lies. But for the first time in months, maybe years, Hewitt and Clara stood side by side in the doorway, not waiting to flee, but to face whatever came. Not survivors, not victims. Just two souls carved hard by the land, daring it to try again. Mott came at dawn. No announcement, no warning, just the sound of hooves, boot leather, and iron wheels grinding through half-frozen mud. Hewitt had expected 6 riders. Mott brought 9, and a wagon with lumber nailed into the shape of a gallows. Pre-made, proud. The townsfolk of Black Hollow watched from behind curtains, their breath frosting glass. No one opened a door.
Ow.
No one lifted a hand. Clara and Hewitt stood on the edge of the tree line, silent, side by side. Behind them, smoke curled from the chimney of their cabin, the only warm place left in a world gone cold with judgment. The gallows stood crooked in the center of town, already draped with rope, a noose swinging slow in the breeze. Hewitt thought it looked more like bait than justice. Mott dismounted first. He wore a clean coat now, star on his chest, bright and sharp. His smile was measured, theatrical. The grin of a man who believed the story ended the way he'd written it. "Quiet, man," he said, tipping his hat. And the whore, Clara, didn't flinch. Hewitt stepped forward, rifle resting across his chest. "Still preaching lies, Mott?" "Truth is what survives, son," Mott said. "And by sunset, only one of our versions will." He turned to his men. "Bring her." They fanned out, cautious, rifles loose in their hands. But Hewitt didn't move. Clara didn't run. She stepped forward of her own will, boots crunching in the frozen dirt, till she stood just feet from Mott. "I'm not afraid to die," she said, her voice low, but unshaken. "That's a shame," Mott replied. "Fear makes the show better." Hey, he motioned to the gallows. 2 men grabbed her arms, led her up the steps. The noose hung like a question waiting to be answered. Hewitt walked behind them, slow, deliberate. He stopped just short of the steps, looked Mott in the eye. "You ever see a fire up close?" he asked. "One that eats bone?" Mott smirked. Saw plenty in the war. Even started a few. Hewitt nodded once, quiet and slow. Then he drew his revolver. One of Mott's deputies dropped before he could lift his rifle. The crowd scattered. Screams, dust, chaos. Clara ducked, ripping her arms from the men who held her. Hewitt fired again. A second man hit square in the chest. A third took a shot at Clara, missed, and was tackled from behind by a blur moving like wind. Walks with Shadows rose from the dirt, knife in one hand, tomahawk in the other. No words, just fury. Gunfire exploded across the square. Mott shouted orders, but the sound was swallowed in the echo of lead. Hewitt moved like a man possessed. Not fast, but unstoppable. Calm as a reaper. He ducked behind the gallows post, took a knee, fired twice more. A horse reared and crashed down, pinning its rider. Mott ducked behind the wagon, teeth clenched, pistol in hand. He looked out, saw Walks with Shadows driving his blade into the side of another man, and froze. Fear crept into his face for the first time. Hewitt rose from cover, gun raised. "Too late for mercy?" he said. Mott lifted his own pistol and fired. The shot hit Hewitt in the side, just above the hip, staggered but didn't fall. He raised his revolver again, steady despite the blood, and aimed straight at Mott's chest. And then Clara stepped between them, not to stop him, to face Mott herself. She held the noose in her hand, torn from the beam. Her eyes locked on the man who had once sworn to protect the town, and instead sold its soul for coin. "You remember my sister?" she said. Mott blinked. She worked your courthouse. You beat her near blind. Then lied about her death to save your badge." Mott's mouth opened, but no words came. "You think we forget?" Clara said, voice rising. "We don't. We survive. We remember." She tossed the noose at his feet. Mott's hand moved toward his pistol again, but too slow. Hewitt shot him clean through the shoulder. Mott dropped, crying out, clutching his arm. Walks with shadows loomed behind him. "No hangman today," he said. Clara took the badge from Mott's coat, stared at it for a long time, then dropped it in the dirt. By noon, the town was silent again. They buried the dead near the pine wood ridge. No markers, no prayers. Just the cold earth and the sound of wind threading through bare limbs. Hewitt's wound was deep but not fatal. Clara stitched it herself, hands steady. They burned the gallows that evening, and the fire rose high into the sky, dancing like defiance. The next morning, they saddled 2 horses and rode west, left the cabin behind, left Black Hollow behind. There were no words between them on that trail. Just the breath of horses, the creak of leather, and the knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it together. Clara settled near Bitterroot Creek, running a small homestead with a quiet strength. She planted trees, raised a few goats, told stories only to those who earned them. Hewitt stayed long enough to teach her how to shoot straighter, hunt cleaner, and recognize the first signs of wolves in the wind. Then one day, he was gone. Left only a note on the porch, scrawled in ink faded by age. "You don't owe the fire anything anymore. Let it go." She searched for him for a time, then stopped. Later that winter, word reached her of a man buried under a cottonwood tree just outside Sweetwater. Saddle atop the grave, locket nailed to the bark. She rode there in silence, stood beneath the branches heavy with snow, opened the locket. Inside, a photograph, stained with time, a young girl, a woman with eyes too tired for her age. Herself, she fell to her knees, not from grief, from love, laid her hand against the grave. "I let it go," she whispered. The wind stirred the branches. The snow fell gently on the saddle. If this story stirred something in your soul, leave your thoughts in the comments. Like and subscribe for more forgotten frontier tales that still echo in the dust.